Welcome back to another edition of the Forza Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Charles Inferno. We're at Forza Athletics. We equip coaches and athletes with the tools they seek out in order to achieve their unique and specific goals. Today we are recording on Tuesday, October 25th. It's a beautiful sunny day. At like mid-70s today. Real nice school day. Had a couple fire drills. Keep up with protocol and what have you. So we had some practice there. It was a good day for it. And we got them out of the way for this fall. So over the weekend I asked a question about any topics or anything anybody really wanted to have me answer or try and tackle as regard to, coaching or training or what have you. I got a great question from a coach that asked about training volume, in so much as how many training days or how many throwing days should an athlete have for their events. You know, how many days should they train discus, shot put, hammer, javelin, weight throw, what have you. So my answer to that question is it depends, and it depends on your athlete and what their goals are. This is the short answer, right? The long answer is, depending on what their goals are, is how I would structure training to maximize their time and what their interests are, really, right? So for example, I'll give four examples of athletes that I've coached and how we structured their training to meet their goals and throwing volume and days prescribed. So last year, Dylan at Alfred State went to nationals in the discus, DIII discus. He had the fourth seated throw in the country, just over 52 meters. So we knew early on in March, when we had our first outdoor practice, that the goal was going to be to go to nationals in the discus. At least the goal was to go to nationals, right? So we developed a plan where he would have 2 discus training days a week, 1 hammer day, and 1 shot put day. And I say depends early on because really that's what his schedule would allow, based on his classes and labs and all that fun engineering stuff and time, basically, right? So we had 2 discus days a week. We would have kind of like a pre-meet on Friday. If we had a meet on Saturday, we wouldn't have pre-meet on Friday, obviously, if we were competing. And then we would restructure our Wednesday, Thursday training to accommodate what we wanted to achieve on Friday. And that's where I've talked about it before. I think I've created a few videos in the past on meet days on Fridays. I'm not really fond of them, right? We lose a training day over the course of the week. It meets on a Friday. Usually they're later in the evenings, which works well with CNS and athletes being prepared, but kind of gets us out of the routine of, practice, meet, where you're kind of disrupting that a little bit. But anyway, so that's what Dylan did. So we had 2 discus days, 1 hammer day, 1 shot day. The shot was early on in the season. We kind of dropped that altogether mid-April because the goal was to also try and hit a mark to go to nationals in the hammer, which we got close to, but didn't quite break the top 20, 25 there. So without throwing the shot, it was basically 2 disc and 2 hammer days that we just rotated, where it was disc hammer. And Friday, if that was a pre-meet, if not, we would just kind of have like an off day on Wednesday, and then double up on another day of the week, depending on like classes, right? So 2 and 2, and then I think like the week before conference in May, we had a training session in the shot put. So Dylan won our conference championships in the shot put, discus, and hammer. He set our meet and conference records in the discus and hammer also. So it was a good day, and it worked out well based on his goals. Before Dylan, we had Lewis and Brandon at NAS. So Lewis's goal at the beginning of his senior season was to win the weight throw and then double back and win the hammer. So he was not a very good shot putter. He wasn't really motivated or interested in throwing the shot put, so we just didn't throw it at all. So we had 3 weight/hammer sessions a week for him, where we would throw Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, where Monday would be a weight day, Tuesday would be a hammer with a chain or a full hammer, maybe like on a short wire we used also. We had 20-pound hammer, so it varied what we did based on, like I said, what the goals were for that weekend. And then Thursday we would come back, and that would be almost like our P-meet, where we take like 4 to 6 weight throws, and that was basically it. So after Lewis won nationals in March, we really focused obviously on the hammer and the discus as well. So he's a 43-meter discus thrower also, not a shot putter. So we would have 3 hammer sessions a week and 2 discus sessions a week. So the hammer varied by session, and again, we had a lot of Friday meets back then, so we would double up either hammer or discus early in the week, and we'd have like a Monday hammer disc day, Tuesday hammer day, off Wednesday, Thursday either hammer disc again, or we would just have a hammer and not throw the discus again if the meet was on Friday. If it was Saturday, we would just have an individual session for discus and hammer. Now Brandon was a 16-meter weight thrower and a 50-foot shot putter indoor in the weight in the shop. Outdoor, his focus was main event shot put. So we had 2 shot put training sessions a week and a discus. So we doubled the shot discus and we rotated. So one day it was shot first, then discus, then the other day was disc, then shot. And then we would have a hammer session, and then whatever the focus was for the week, we would have another either shot put or discus session. So we would double up 2 days, so that's 4 training sessions over 2 days, right? And I kind of count each event as a separate training session, because there's different goals and like different types of expectations and accountability with that. So if we had double session on Monday, where we would throw discus and shot, and then we would do it again, so that's 2 days, right? We would throw the hammer usually on Tuesday, and then Wednesday maybe off, or if we didn't have a meet, we would do hammer discus on Thursday, and then maybe shot put on Wednesday. So really it depended, shot discus, getting everything confused here, shot discus would be the double, but it's really the same thing. So Brandon, depending on the week, would get 6 training sessions in between Monday and Friday, with an off day in the middle there. 6 shot disc and hammer. Hopefully you're still following along. Julia at Fredonia, when she won nationals in the weight throw in 2009, similar to Lewis, we had 3 training sessions for the weight and then 1 for the shot. So we had a chain, we would do indoor chain work. We had a tarp in Fredonia that you could throw into. It was really nice. So she would have 4 training sessions a week indoor, and then outdoor, opposite of the other gentleman. She was not really particularly interested in throwing the discus, but we would throw like once a week for points at conference, basically. And then we would have 2 shot put sessions a week and 3 hammer sessions a week. So the discus day would double up with one of the shot days, and then we'd have 3 hammer days. And she would have, 5 to 6 training sessions a week also. And like I said, the training sessions, I counted them as individual events, right? So in a typical week, now the short answer, a typical week, depending on what the goals are for the athlete, if it's indoor, either 2 to 3 days of the primary event with 1 to 2 of the secondary event. So either shot or weight, pick them, right? We don't have an indoor conference championship at Alfred, so we throw the hammer basically all the way through the winter. The week of the meets, the first indoor meet, I introduce the weight to the kids, and then we go to nationals. Hopefully we go to nationals, and we go to the first 2 meets off of 2 weight sessions. But it's really all hammer all the way through, even in the winter when it's not really nice outside. Outdoor, again, depending on the athlete, the days per week to train, right? I would say 3 days for the primary event, or 3 training sessions for the primary event, regardless, shot, disc, javelin, or hammer. 2 days for the secondary event, and then 1 day for the third. So just to give you like a point of reference, right? So Dylan last year won our conference at Alfred State. He won the hammer with 54 meter throw, and that's our conference record. Discus, he threw 52-59, I believe. That was his PR season best. So that was ranked fourth nationally in D3 for reference. And then he won the shot put at 1450. So other conferences, like in our region, like the SUNYAC conference, for example, you're gonna have to go like 1650 to win the shot. Discus, like I said, Dylan would have won all but 3 conferences last year with his 52 meter throw that weekend. Actually, he may have won all of the conference championships at D3 with that throw, not having the numbers in front of me. And then the hammer for SUNYAC, you gotta be like 55 to 58 now to have a realistic chance of winning. So that just gives you some perspective as far as like what we worked with last year with him. Lewis, I mean, his weight throw is 6 all time. So to give you a point of reference, at 20:45. Let's see, Brandon finished. Let's see, he did win 1 conference championship in the discus his freshman year. So in the E8 Empire 8 conference, low mid 40s will win the discus. Last year there was a gentleman who threw 47. So somewhere in that like 155 range, 160 range is a pretty safe bet to win. Hammer, there was a gentleman that went to nationals, so he threw like 57 as like a point of reference also. But really, it's like it's going to depend, right, on what the goals are, because I think it's different on you want to win your conference or do you want to go to nationals. I think there's a lot of parallels there with wanting to win nationals or wanting to go to nationals and win your conference, but depending on how close the meets are and what the expectations are, and trying to pull off a big throw at your conference meet, and then trying to replicate or come back and do it again and again to qualify for nationals. Sometimes it might be difficult for some athletes, not all, but I'm just saying it's difficult to throw really far on consecutive meets depending on what really far is. But like at D3, let's see, Dylan had like, I don't know, 15, maybe 16 throws last season over 50 meters. A couple over 52, a whole bunch over 51, which is, I mean, that's really good. And he was training, discus like 2 days a week some days, right? So I guess it depends on the athlete really, and other factors that play a role into it. I spend a lot of time with my athletes working on mindset and like the mental aspects of throwing. So as far as that aspect of sport performance, so even though we may not throw as much, I think mentally, I think between the ears, my athletes at any given meet might be better prepared in that regard, where we spend time talking about routines, we spend time talking about rituals, we spend time talking about breathing and focus, and picking certain cues and certain aspects and certain things to really work on and emphasize during meets, where we're not like scattered all over the place, where we actually have a plan of what we're going to do and what type of outcome we're expecting for that specific meet, right? And I think that when we talk about holistic coaching, I think that allows athletes to be better prepared for the rigors of competition. And you could be the most physically prepared athlete at the track meet, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win just because you have a personal best of like 3 or 4 or 5 meters farther than somebody else. Let's say like the discus or hammer, for example, right? And in the heat of the moment, when other competitors are really close to you in performance, where Lewis, his senior year, his average margin of victory up until nationals was like 3 meters, right? Like there were some meets that we went to through 1997, and second place was like 15 and change. And he won nationals by 1.5 meters also. Where in the hammer, the difference between first place and like 5th place was 1.5 meters, right? So you're looking at not a lot of distance. So really, it all comes down to how well you know your athletes, how well you can prepare them for that specific meet, how well they are prepared both physically and mentally, right? So the types of communication and conversations and autonomy supportive behaviors and expectations and all these things that I've talked about before, these like buzzwords and sports science and mindset performance really play a role and have an impact on how well our athletes are going to perform in competition. And much like those of you who might be watching or listening to this today, I think there's coaches that have been to meets where the best athlete, the top seeded individual, didn't win, where athletes did not live up to expectations. And I shared that in another video after we got back from nationals, where I looked at the numbers, and across the throwing events, there were 2 number 1 seeds between the men's and the women's events that individual won. Where there were other events where the top seeded individual barely made the finals and was an All-American. But the average of like distances thrown compared to season best at nationals was like -2, -3. If anybody's interested in that, I mean, it's on the TFER's website. I just created an Excel file, exported the data, and just did some calculations, right? But athletes who throw far leading up to nationals sometimes aren't the ones that perform the best. And knowing your athletes and having a good perspective on like emotional control and those types of, I guess, locus of control would be the better term, is better gonna give your athletes opportunities to be successful. So that's the long end of it. Is it depends based on all these different metrics that hopefully you're collecting data on as a coach. The short answer, again, is indoor, maybe 2 to 3 days on your primary event and 1 to 2 on your secondary. Outdoor, depending on the athlete and life and all these things, I would say 3 days for the primary, if you're able. 2 to 3 for sure. At least 2 for your secondary, depending on what the goals are. And 1 for your third. I mean, if you're competing for points at a conference meet, then you try and maximize your time that way. But that's from my perspective, and working with higher level D3 athletes. At D1, you see sometimes athletes that are going to nationals or qualifying for nationals in all 3 events. Or in the past, there were athletes that were trying to win 3 individual titles in the shot put, discus, and hammer, right? Where you have athletes that win 2 events, 2 individual events, maybe the All-American in the third, or they win 1 and they finish second or third. So it really does come down to athlete goals, athlete expectations, what your expectations are as a coach, and how you structure the whole yearly plan, as opposed to just looking at it day by day or week by week progressions. So hopefully that answered your question. I appreciate the question. If you have any other questions that may arise from this presentation, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Forza Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Charles Inferno, and have a great day.